My name is Peter Homberg. I'm a lawyer, and I'm not doing that for the first time. And after my last presentation, I met one of the audience outside, and he said, Peter, I like your presentations, but I'm always so depressed afterwards. And I said, well, the best advice would be go out, have a smoke. It's a sunny day. That's not legal. So the advice would be stay here. I have bad news for everybody of you. So let's have a look at what we're going to discuss today. Medical cannabis in Germany has a relatively short history, starting in 2016, which we will have a look at. And it has developed over the last 5 years, very dramatically, I would say. It's a success story to a certain extent, of course, well behind all expectations which analysts had when the market opened. And the same may apply, and we'll have a look at that, for the recreational market. We learned this morning that Germany is looking to open the market for recreational cannabis. And we'll see what are the hurdles here for everybody, cultivators, importers, and all the others who have a stake in that. So if we look into the medical cannabis market, that is actually the history. In 2017, we actually had the first Cannabis Act, Cannabis as Medicine Act, after a decision of the highest administrative court in April 2016, and it took the government approximately less than a year to implement a new law changing the whole environment of the use of cannabis for medicinal purposes. A year, that is quick. And I think we should bear that in mind if we look into what has to come with regard to the changes in the recreational market, even more complex. So in 2019, we all learned that there was the successful tender of 3 companies who have actually received a license to cultivate cannabis domestically here in Germany, Afria, Demican, and Aroa. And in July 2021, we had the first piece of the cannabis made in Germany on the market. Every year, the Federal Opium Agency at the BfArM, which is the German FDA, applies for quantities at the INCB, which is the International Narcotic Board, which is the control board of the UN single conventions. And they grant certain quantities, certain caps every year for the import of cannabis for medicinal purposes, research purposes, and of course research and development purposes. Here you can see that in 2020 we had the peak with 28.4 metric tons. It is now leveled at around 25 tons, also for the years 2021 and 2022. And this does not mean that these quantities are imported indeed, but it gives you the range which you can use as importer for your quantities. These are indeed the published facts and figures for the import of cannabis for medical and scientific purposes in Germany. And here we see an increase, and in 2021 we had around 20 metric tons as an import of cannabis, not only flowers but also extracts for medical and scientific purposes. So these facts are setting the stage for what we have to discuss in a minute when we come to the recreational market. So if you look into the cultivation of cannabis in Germany, the quality standards are set by the GACP, the Good Manufacturing Practice GMP, EU GMP actually, and the German monograph of cannabis flowers. The distribution company for the cannabis cultivated in Germany is Cansativa. They won a tender, and they are the logistical partner of the BfArM. So how does that work? Demican, Avria, and Aurora are selling their cannabis to the BfArM. Well, they don't take it into possession, but it will be directly then delivered to the logistical company, to the logistical partner, which is Demican, who is then distributing the cannabis to the pharmacies. Here we have the facts and figures with respect to the first harvest. It was delayed, of course, for various reasons. The pandemic has played a significant role, of course, but now the three companies are actually cultivating cannabis flowers in Germany for the German market, and we have heard this morning from from Cornelius Maurer, that what is the pricing of this cannabis, which is significantly below the prices for imported cannabis in Germany. The demand, of course, in Germany has always been higher than the cultivation quantities, because these three companies have been granted to cultivate a quantity of 10.4 metric tons, not per year, but over 4 years. So it's, if I'm not mistaken, 2.6 tons per year, which is a little bit currently less, around 12% of the current market size. However, there's a possibility that the BfArM is going to increase that by 10%, but still, Germany for the medicinal cannabis market will be an importer, a significant importer. The number of patients which we are currently estimating are between 80 to 100,000. Very difficult to really see, because they are patients who have applied for the use of medicinal cannabis. They are dropping out again. The new patients are coming in, so they are not really steady and precise facts and figures. However, I think the number 80 to 100,000 patients is in the range of being correct. Of course, it is far away from what the analysts, even the industry, has expected when the change of cannabis for medicinal purposes actually occurred in 2017. In Canada, we have around 1% of the population. If that figure would be applied in Germany, we would have had 800,000 patients. Well, it will grow. We have heard that this morning. It's significantly growing, and we are expecting it to be in the region of 1 million, 1.2 million in the years to come, 2 years, 3 years. And we will also see what kind of impact the recreational market may have on the numbers of patients for the medicinal market. However, still Germany is by far the biggest market for medicinal cannabis in Europe. If you look into Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, they have significant lower numbers. And what we haven't discussed so far, even in the other meetings, is we have a very large European country which is relatively reluctant to introduce cannabis for medicinal purposes, which is France. And this may play a significant role in our discussion if we come to the recreational market. So what are the obstacles? Why is this market not as quickly developing as we believed at the beginning? Well, we have physicians who have to prescribe cannabis. You don't get medicinal cannabis without a prescription. And the majority of the physicians are relatively reluctant. They don't know enough about the product. They don't know enough about what kind of product should be prescribed to which indication of the respective patient. And as you know, the three sentences are most used by lawyers. No? Number 1, no, this doesn't work. Number 2, yes, but. And number 3, it depends. So the health insurance companies, of course, also have a certain obstacle, are causing obstacle, because not all the applications are granted. for the reimbursement. How does that work? If you are a patient who would require a therapy with cannabis, you go to your physician. The physician, if he is well educated and if he is of course positive for the use of cannabis as a medicinal product, is prescribing that. However, before the first prescription takes place, the physician and the patient have to fill out a form for the reimbursement, which has to be filed with the respective health insurance company of the patient. The health insurance company is checking that application and then either granting or not granting the respective reimbursement. And if you look into these facts and figures, and I've chosen here the Barmer Ersatzkasse, which is a health insurance company in Germany with 8.7 million insured people, you can see how the rejection rate is currently steady. So what is the reason for that? First of all, the form which it has to be used for the application is not that easy to fill out. You may need a lawyer for that. It's really complicated because you have to name the patient. You have to, of course, give the right indication. You have to describe the indication. You have also to describe what kind of other medication have you been used as a physician before you're coming to a cannabis, because cannabis is seen to be only another therapeutics for the respective treatment. So it's not the first one which you're going to prescribe. And as such, the rejection rate is steady, I would say, at around 1/3 of the applications. Something which, of course, from a legal point of view has been seen very critically, because the law provides only for rejection if there is really a reason, a real reason, a substantive reason. Well, some of the rejections don't even have reasons. They're just rejected, which, of course, from the patient point of view is difficult to accept and is actually, if you look into the respective law, not correct. So what are the pitfalls of the regulatory framework so far? Well, if you want to use or sell cannabis, you need to, of course, various permits. I just listed them here. It's a manufacturing permit, an import permit for the respective product. And what is important is, if you are an importer in Germany, if you have those licensed, you actually have to do the following. For the respective import of a specific lot, you have to apply to your local authority and say, from that exporter who is EU GMP certified, I would like to import a respective lot into Germany. Quantity and, of course, the quality has to be defined. And then the respective authority is checking whether, and that is important for our next step here, does the country of origin qualify under the 1961 UN Single Convention, yes or no? Is their respective legal framework in place, which is providing the respective structure for granting licenses to cultivate and to export? No exporter who has not received the export license of the country of origin is allowed to export. And the German authorities are checking that, which is important, as I said, for our next issue if we come to the recreational market. These are the countries where currently Germany gets imports from. This is a response from the federal government from September 2021, relatively new. And you see that a number of countries have come along with Canada and the Netherlands, who have been the first importers of medicinal cannabis into Germany. So now we have, of course, Portugal, Australia, Uruguay, and so on. Well, some of them have exported cannabis products for research and development purposes, not for marketing or commercialization in the medical cannabis area. What is often overlooked is that besides the 1961 UN Single Convention, we have two other conventions which are regulating the illicit drug trafficking. The 1971 Convention on Psychotropic Substances and the 1988 UN Convention against illicit traffic in narcotic drugs. We have to bear that in mind if we come now to the question, how does the respective regulatory environment should look like for the import of cannabis for recreational purposes, if at all. Just to finish on the medical cannabis side, the advertisements regulations are extremely strict because it's a narcotic. You cannot anyway market it with all these marketing tools which you may have in mind. Now let's look into the recreational market. Now here comes the beef. The current situation is that without the approval of the B-Farm, you cannot cultivate, manufacture, trade, import, export, supply, sell, and so on, any kind of punishable substances, including cannabis. However, according to paragraph 31A of the German Narcotics Act, the public prosecutor can refrain from prosecution against those who are in possession of small quantities of cannabis. And this differs from state to state. Small quantities, it's between 6 and 15 grams per person. The consumption is legally not prohibited. It's considered self-harming and not prohibited. And now comes the new government in place. Since September 2021, the new government, consisting of the Social Democratic Party, the Green Party, and the Liberal Party, have actually decided to legalize the recreational cannabis in Germany. The proposal was establishment of a control distribution through licensed stores, pharmacies, and however, there's no clear plan. And there was, of course, no thought given to the fact, where do we get the cannabis from? Where do we source it? Do we ask the Dutch to just send it over, or do we cultivate it on our own? Or what about Uruguay? Why don't we import that from Uruguay directly, because they have legalized cannabis anyway for recreational purposes already? So that's the questions which nobody actually asked themselves. They were thinking about, and we'll see that, what could be the possible tax income? What are the financial benefits of it? How do we distribute that? And of course, who should get it? Of course, adults. I think that is clear for everybody. How to protect others from the respective liberalization. So what we need is a new law. And here comes again the relatively complicated legalization mechanism. And we have discussed that briefly in our first session today. I don't know whether you have seen that. How does that really work? I don't want to spend too much time on that chart, but it's a long process. And if we have, and we believe it would be a bill which either is a bill to be consented to or a bill which needs to be not objected to, then we have the so-called second chamber, the Bundesrat, playing a significant role in that legalization process. And if you look into the government, which is now consisting of Liberal, Social Democrats, and the Green, and look into the chamber, the second chamber, the Bundesrat, you will see that there is a significant difference here. We saw that this morning, all the black and all the gray are the more conservative parties involved here. We have coalitions, of course, in various states of Germany, and we have different numbers of voting rights for the respective states. And if we really have to go with that legislation, the new legislation, through the Bundesrat, there is a high probability that it may not pass in the first place. Which means then we are going back to this relatively complicated process on this side. Which means it will be a significant time-consuming procedure before we really have the next cannabis law in place, which liberalizes the use of cannabis for the consumption of the public or adults. So just for a couple of minutes, the fiscal impact, which is one of the drivers of the liberalization of recreational cannabis in Germany. We have the Düsseldorf Institute for Competition and Economics. They are coming to relatively same figures as in your presentation this morning, Cornelius. They are estimating 400 metric tons per annum for recreational cannabis. Of course, not in the first place, it will ramp up over time. But if we're going to look into the best estimate, it will be around 200 tons. Well, the facts are, or the estimations are going this and that way. We will see how this will work out. However, if you look into the impact, the financial impact, it's around 4.7 billion euros per year, comprising of a special cannabis tax, the value-added tax, of course, of 90%, trade tax, corporate income tax, and of course all the savings which you have, for example, police costs, court costs, and correctional costs because of the liberalization, which is a significant impact. So how now, going back now to the international law, how and where do we source the cannabis for the recreational purposes? Germany is a member of the 3 UN conventions, and if you are going to import cannabis for recreational purposes, you are significantly violating all 3 UN conventions. So one of the solutions was, well, why don't we terminate them? Just terminate them, and then we apply again to become a member of those treaties with the objection against the use of cannabis, which some of the countries have done. We have around 156 countries who are members of these 3 conventions. So from my point of view, I do not believe that the new German government is going to terminate 3 significant UN treaties, UN conventions, just because they would like to introduce cannabis for recreational purposes. And if they proceed without doing that, of course they are violating it, like other countries did as well. We will see that in a minute. So if you look into other countries like Canada and Uruguay, they have, of course, legalized recreational cannabis and have been warned by the INCB that they have violated the convention, but nothing really happened afterwards. But they could significantly punish these 3 countries if they would. What is also always neglected is that we have EU law, which should be taken into consideration as well. Under the Schengen Convention, which refers to the respective UN conventions, and with the EU Framework Decision from 2004, the member states have undertaken to prevent the supply of narcotic drugs of all kinds, including cannabis, taking into consideration the respective conventions. And in comparison to the INCB, the European legislation has provided for an effective enforcement mechanism. there is an infringement procedure which can be initiated by a member state if it believes that the respective Schengen Treaty has been violated. So nobody has really thought about that so far, and I don't believe that the German government would like to go that route and risk that to a certain extent by, for example, importing cannabis for recreational purposes from other countries. So if we look into the compatibility with the international law, there's only one source of recreational cannabis, which Cornelius Maurer this morning, of course, as one of the possible parties benefiting from that, which is actually the domestic cultivation. But I have bad news for you as well. You are, of course, in a wonderful starting position. Afria, Demican, and Aurora are currently cultivating and can ramp up, as we heard this morning. However, those who have been in the tender process and have not won for whatever reason may challenge that, because what we believe is going to be the mechanism is not another tender process, but it is an invitation to apply for cultivation in Germany for recreational purposes, very much the same as we have seen that in the Netherlands recently. So of course you would be in a wonderful position, but the others who have not been granted a license but participated in the tender process for medicinal cannabis could claim that this is a certain act of unfair competition by saying, you know, these three have granted the respective right to cultivate medicinal cannabis, but we have not, and now they are in a better position in the respective invitation for providing the market with recreational cannabis. So we'll see how they would like, how this will be steered, controlled by the respective government. I don't think it will be a tender process. So if we look into the possibilities the German government may have, number one, terminating the participation in the UN conventions. Number two, doing either decriminalization or legalization. Or number three, actually doing domestic cultivation. From our point of view, they will probably go for the domestic cultivation process, which is the safest way, as Uruguay has done, as Canada has done, and as Malta has done. They all have domestic cultivation for the recreational market. So we'll see how that will work out. We are now in the process that the respective government has expert hearings. The first one is today, the last one on June 30th, so 5 hearings. And then, of course, the drafting process of the new recreational law will start, which probably will not be finished before the Parliament holidays, which start on July 5. So we will probably see anything in September, October this year. And if we look into the timeline, I do not expect that a respective bill will be launched in the first quarter 2023, probably in the second quarter. And then we see how this all then will build up and even how it will work with respect to the various participants in that market. So bad news for everybody. Thank you very much.